Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP met his girlfriend during freshman orientation, and they quickly became close. Their relationship thrived until she joined a sorority, leading to growing distance between them. At a frat party, he discovered her cheating in a threesome. Hurt and seeking revenge, he reported her to the sorority, causing her to leave. He cut all contact afterward. Now let's get into the story. My girlfriend and I both met during our freshman orientation at our university. There was this week-long event for first-year students, and she and I were in the same orientation group. My girlfriend and I just clicked, and we spent a lot of time together. There was a dance for the freshmen at the end of the orientation week, and I went with her as my date. We actually both had a date and ended up losing our virginity to each other later that night. Looking back, it was really embarrassing, but it was also pretty sweet. We dated for 2 years while we were in college. I really loved her. Neither of us was in a place to even think about getting married or starting a life together, but we were comfortable with each other. Our university had a vibrant Greek life scene. I have always thought fraternities and sororities were weird, so I had absolutely no intention of joining one. My girlfriend, on the other hand, had been dreaming about joining a specific sorority for years. When she picked out what college she was going to, she knew that she wanted to rush that sorority as soon as she had the chance. During the summer between first and second year, she rushed the sorority that she wanted and ended up getting in. I was happy for her because I knew it was something that she had really been looking forward to. But I was a little uneasy about the idea of it. This specific sorority was a prime example of why I hated them. Everyone there was like a clone of the others. Her schedule was always so full of things that she was doing with the sorority and her classwork that I rarely got to see her. She was always going to parties, fundraisers, and campus events that the sorority had been planning. I felt like I was getting left behind in some ways. Before, we would talk every day, but after she joined, we barely even texted each other. We finally got together one day for lunch, and I addressed my concerns to her. She told me that it was only temporary and that as soon as she was fully settled in the sorority things, we'd get back to normal. The last thing she wanted was to break up with me, she said. During that lunch, she started telling me about some of the crazy rules that the sorority had. They expected that their sorority sisters would behave in such a way to positively represent the sorority to prospective members. That meant the way they dressed had to be a certain way. They couldn't go out with certain kinds of men, and they needed to be treated well, to uphold the values of the sorority at all times. Several weeks went by and things between my girlfriend and I weren't improving. I still cared for her and I wanted to be with her, but there was so much distance between us just because she joined that sorority. I didn't want to be the person to tell her not to join or give her an ultimatum, but it was very stressful for me. She texted me one night and invited me to a big frat party that was held annually. Again, I can't stress this enough. I hate Greek life, and I had no desire to go to that party. However, I wanted to see my girlfriend. I had a work study on campus to help with some events that went on for the undergrads on the weekends, so I told her that I would be there if I could get out of work early. At the beginning of the night, it really wasn't looking like I was going to be able to sew. I texted my girlfriend and told her that. However, the movie that I was screening for the students was not very good and a lot of people ended up walking out before it was over. I was able to end my shift very early and I figured I would go and see my girlfriend at the party. It was very crowded when I got there and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know anybody at the party and I was just looking for my girlfriend. I recognized a couple of the other girls from her sorority, but I didn't feel very comfortable going up to them to talk. I walked around the fraternity house and looked for my girlfriend. I made it to the top floor where there were a few bedrooms. I opened a couple of doors and peeked inside to see if she was there. I was really hoping that she wasn't because the idea of her being in a bedroom in a frat house made me very nervous. I really liked her, and I didn't want to get my heart broken over what might be happening behind those closed doors. Unfortunately, it was exactly what I was afraid of. I opened one of the doors and found my girlfriend kissing one guy with another guy behind her kissing her neck. She was topless, and they were all three clearly about to have intimate. I just stood there for a minute in shock as I watched. The guy behind my girlfriend actually saw me and yelled at me to get out. That's when my girlfriend opened her eyes and looked at me and rushed to the door to talk to me. I just slammed the door shut in her face and made my way out of the frat house to go back to my room. She was blowing up my phone and trying to get through to me, but I didn't respond. I was hurt by what I saw. Part of me had expected it when I was walking through the hallway, but I was hoping it wasn't going to be real. There had been a lot of distance growing between us since the beginning of the semester, and I guess I knew that we weren't going to last forever. But being cheated on really hurts. In the morning, I sent her a text message and told her that I didn't want to hear any explanations from her and that we were over. There was no excuse that she could have given me that would have made what she did okay. I blocked her number and spent a few days sulking over it before I decided to get back to my normal life. My mind kept wandering back to the code of conduct that she showed me over lunch a few weeks prior. With all of the ridiculous rules, I couldn't help but think that cheating on your boyfriend and having a threesome with two frat guys would be some kind of violation of the sorority's values. I knew how much being in that sorority meant to her, and I wanted to hurt her and get revenge in some way. I ended up reaching out to the president of the sorority on Facebook and telling her exactly what happened. I didn't really think it would do anything, but if it could sully her reputation, that was enough for me. The president of the sorority just left me on red. A couple of weeks later, I got an email from my ex-girlfriend cursing me out. I guessed when I told the president about what happened, she decided to tell a lot of other sorority members. Everybody hence started gossiping about her and talking about what she did, and the rumors were spreading throughout the sorority. She felt so uncomfortable that she ended up leaving. She blamed me for it and told me about a whole host of opportunities she was going to be missing out on because she was no longer in that sorority. I don't know if she thought I was going to feel bad about it or what, but I didn't. In my eyes, that was just the consequences of her actions. If there were jobs that she would miss out on after college, that was entirely her own fault, not mine. I ended up blocking her email as well and not talking to her for the rest of the time I was in college. There was a brief incident where we were actually in a class together. We realized that on the first day, but when I went back for the next class, she wasn't there. I can only assume she dropped the class because we were in it together. Today's second story. In this story, Opie, married for 8 years, discovered his wife, whom he'd been with for 11 years, was cheating with an intern. Despite her denial, he caught them in the act at her office. Following the incident, they divorced. The wife lost her job, her marriage, and now shares split custody of their child. Now let's get into the story. I've 32 male been with my wife 31 female for a total of 11 years, but we have been married for 8. We met in college and we started dating about halfway through. We moved in together after graduation and we went through all of the ups and downs of our postgraduate life together. She made everything more tolerable for me when we were going through the bad times. As soon as we both had good jobs and stable incomes, I proposed. I knew that I wanted to marry her and be with her for the rest of my life. She said yes, and shortly after we got married and started building happy life together. We have 1 child together, and we bought our first house in the suburbs. It was the kind of life we had always dreamed of having. My wife and I were both very dedicated and diligent workers. So over the years, we have been given several promotions and opportunities with our respective employers. About a year ago, my wife had gotten a big promotion at work, which gave her her very own office and assistant. I went to all of the office parties and gatherings with her. It was a pretty close-knit environment with all of the employees. Over the years, we've lost contact with most of our friends from college, but we have a pretty nice friend group with our coworkers. One day, out of the blue, I got a text message from one of her coworkers who I was good friends with, telling me that my wife might have been behaving inappropriately with an intern. I was shocked to hear the news, and I didn't believe it right away. When she got home, I showed her the message and I asked her about it. She told me that she had no idea what her coworker was talking about, but she was going to talk to him first thing in the morning to clear it up. The last thing she wanted was a sexual harassment case or anything of the sort when it wasn't true. She was pretty upset about the message, so it was difficult to tell if she was being honest or not. I was inclined to believe her because she had never given me any reason to doubt her throughout the entirety of our relationship. When she got home, I showed her the message and I told her that I didn't believe her. At home the following day, she told me that she had a conversation with a coworker and he explained what happened. He thought he saw them in a compromising position through her window, but she told him that what he saw was them sitting close while she helped show him something on the computer. The intern even confirmed that was the case and assured the coworker that nothing was going on. I felt relieved that it seemed to have been over. I didn't think that my wife was cheating on me, but it was good to know that she had resolved that issue with her coworker. Several weeks later, my office gave all of the employees a 4-day weekend because they had to renovate some parts of the building. I had that Monday off and figured it would be nice to surprise my wife with a nice lunch at work. I stopped by her favorite restaurant, grabbed her usual order, and went to her office. I ran into a few of her coworkers, and we caught up for a couple of minutes before I made my way to my wife. I had stopped by her office many times before, and normally I would knock a couple of times and then peek inside. When I went to do that this time, the door was locked. I figured she was in a meeting of some kind and didn't want to be interrupted by anyone. But I heard some shuffling on the other side of the door, and my wife said to give her just a minute. I waited for her to open it, and when she did, I saw that there was a young man behind her desk with a chair next to hers. My wife brought me in and introduced me to her intern. I noticed immediately that his cheeks were kind of flushed, and he had his hands resting on his groin. After what her coworker accused her of, I wouldn't think she would be so close to her intern with the door locked like that. I definitely had some red flags waving at the time. I told my wife that I brought her lunch, and she thanked me, dismissing her intern for an early lunch. I asked her why the door was locked, and she said that she hadn't realized it was. She said she must have bumped it. It was just one of those push-button locks, so it kind of made sense. The intern hurried out of the office, and I had lunch with my wife. I got home and just couldn't shake the feeling that I had interrupted something. The way the intern looked was pretty suspicious, and given what her coworker told me, I think it was reasonable to question what I saw. Later that night, she called me and told me that she had a last-minute Zoom meeting with some overseas clients and would be coming home late. That was a very rare thing to happen to her. She was a very busy woman at work, and last-minute things just didn't happen. I was even more suspicious about what was going on. I thought about what I wanted to do for a bit, and eventually I reached out to the coworker who told me about the intern. When I called him and asked him specifically what he saw, he implied that he thought he saw my wife performing oral on the intern. At least, she was in the position to be doing so. I asked him if there really was a last-minute meeting, and he told me that he didn't think there was. I think with the questions I was asking, he was able to figure out that I thought there was something going on between her and the intern that night. An important thing to know about this guy: he was next in line for the promotion that my wife got. I was aware that things he said could only be taken with a grain of salt because his motives might not have been the best, but if what he was saying was true, I needed to figure it out. He offered to meet me at the office so he could let me in since he had clearances to go. I agreed, and we met there about 15 minutes later. He brought me up to their offices where we could hear that somebody was still there and having very loud intimate. Without even seeing who it was, I knew that it was my wife. I heard those noises before. Still, we walked toward them so we could catch them in the act. I found my wife on her desk with the intern. When I opened the door, they jumped apart from each other and tried to cover themselves. My wife stammered, trying to find the words to explain what was going on, but she couldn't. I regretted not getting any documented evidence of it, but thankfully I had another witness there with me, so hopefully they could testify in the divorce proceedings that my wife was in fact cheating on me. I stormed out of the office and went home, locking myself in the bedroom so my wife couldn't get in. The following day, I reached out to the coworker that I had gone to the office with, and he told me that he was reporting it to HR. Later that day, I overheard my wife get a call, and it was clear that she was terminated. She was very upset by whatever happened on the phone call. The intern was let go from the office as well. I asked the guy what that would mean for him, and he told me that likely he would not get credit for whatever class he was doing the internship for and would most likely have to retake it. It wasn't the worst punishment for him, but at the same time, I do feel like my wife was in a position of power with him, which seemed like she could have taken advantage of it. I did end up divorcing my wife, and with the testimony of the other person who was with me when we discovered her cheating, I did not have to give her anything in the divorce. She lost her job and her husband, house, and won't get to see her child much anymore due to split custody. All for some meaningless fling with her intern. Today's third story. In this story, OP dated his girlfriend for 7 months, troubled by her obsessive selfies. They married after she included him in her posts, but her controlling behavior strained their relationship. At a family reunion, he discovered her cheating with his brother, exposed them, and left. They married, opened their relationship, and both contracted an STD. Now let's get into the story. My girlfriend, 24 female, and I, 25 male, were dating for 7 months when she started taking selfies and full body portraits while we were out together. She didn't ask me to be in them, and when I asked her why she didn't take pictures with me, she said she didn't think I'd take an interest in her obsessive photography. That's what she called it anyway. She didn't tell me she had certain apps, and I didn't see her on her phone more than the minimum, minus all the picture taking. Even though I brought it up, she still didn't ask me to be in a majority of her pictures. As a matter of fact, she started asking me to take her full body post pictures. I refused to take her pictures and decided to tell her I wanted her to stop doing it. Why would she be taking so many pictures, if not for validation and attention? I didn't believe for 1 second that no one saw these pictures. I just didn't know where she was posting them. We sat in a cafe, and first I told her about something funny I saw earlier that day to ease my nerves. I was surprised that she laughed really hard and thought it was hysterical. A few seconds later, she got serious and told me she thought it was time for her to say how she really felt about me. Then she said she loved me. She dropped the L word. I was taken aback, but instead of telling her I loved her too, I told her I wanted to talk about why and how often she posted photos of herself online. She was suddenly very deflated and said she hoped I wasn't going to ask her to stop because that's what her exes always did. I asked her if she knew why she wanted to do it so much, and she said it was because it was like a journal of where she was and what she looked like throughout her life. She said it helped her to grow as a person, to reflect and think about where she was in life and where she was headed. I was about to tell her she could do the same thing with a paper journal, but then she surprised me. She said she would add me to her online accounts and give me her passcode. She said she would stop posting pictures of herself unless it was just her face with me in it. I thought this compromise was more than fair and actually proved to me that she cared what I had to say and how I felt about her vanity. So our relationship felt like one worth keeping, and I did check her phone occasionally using the passcode she gave me. There was never anything bad on her phone. We got married shortly after. As soon as we moved in together, there were problems. She was extremely insistent about every little detail of our home. I eventually learned to stay out of certain things, but it got to the point where I didn't really want to talk to her about anything because I knew she might blow a fuse. One day she'd tell me she wanted me to be more involved in what she was up to, and the next day I'd try to give her my opinion or ask her questions about her activities, and she'd look at me like I just lost the game. I was growing more confused and frustrated by the day until I decided to talk to her about things. Just like before, as soon as I was ready to say something. She told me she heard about my family reunion coming up and how she couldn't wait to go with me and see everyone. I didn't know how she heard about it before I did, but I thought her eagerness to see my family was a good sign. I thought that maybe she wasn't as annoyed with me as I thought she was. In the days leading up to the reunion, she was on her phone more, but she also seemed more receptive and attentive to my ideas and what I wanted to share with her. I felt relieved and like I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. She dressed nicely for the reunion and made her best dish for it. As soon as we walked in, she started scanning the crowd with a big smile. She went into the kitchen with her dish and was warmly greeted by my aunts and grandmother. I breathed a sigh of relief and felt like I still had a wife. I went to the bathroom, and by the time I came back out, she wasn't in the kitchen anymore. She was in the backyard by the pool. I didn't even know my aunt had an in-ground pool put in, but there was my wife already wearing her bathing suit, lounging with her legs in the water. My brother was sitting beside her, eating a burger and chatting. I sat beside my wife and greeted them. Suddenly, their conversation died down and they seemed put off by my presence. My wife got in the pool, leaving us to stare at her. I looked at my brother, and he was watching my wife shamelessly. I punched him in the shoulder, making him jump out of his skin. He apologized and walked off. Once the kids went to bed, the adults in the reunion started drinking. My wife encouraged me to drink more with her, since neither of us had to drive, and we didn't have to work the next day. It got to the point where I fell out of my chair and started crawling away from a card game because I could no longer function. When I came to, it was still dark outside, and I was in a guest room bed. My wife's coat, purse, clothes, and shoes were in the room, but she wasn't. My head was throbbing, and I was extremely thirsty. I got a drink in the kitchen and started peeking in bedrooms to look for her. She wasn't anywhere. I finally went out back and looked towards the tree lining. That's when I saw them, my brother, according to my wife. I screamed at them and started rushing over. My brother panicked, put away his stuff, and started running while apologizing to me. As I passed my horrified wife, I called her what she was and continued chasing my brother until I tackled him in the yard and got a few hits in. He was begging me to stop, so I did, but I was still fuming. I just asked him why and how he could do this to me. He started bawling and said he was sorry he fell for her. I knew it wasn't just his fault. I looked at her and asked her the same thing, only more devastated. She said she felt like we were drifting apart, and as soon as she said that, I scoffed and yelled. That was the stupidest thing she could have said. I decided they deserved each other. I went inside the house and woke up all of my adult relatives, including my mom and dad, to tell them that my wife belonged to my brother now. She was to be addressed and known as his wife. They all started freaking out, at first wondering if it was a terrible hoax. I assured them it wasn't, and stood aside for them to scold the adulterers. My brother and wife stood on the back porch, completely ashamed and blocked off from getting more clothing. I took the car and left. Despite the family's disapproval, my brother and ex-wife actually did get married. I know it's no surprise to us that their traditional marriage didn't last. She cheated on him just a year into their marriage. What did surprise me, though, is that he didn't divorce her. Instead, they started an open marriage and started sleeping with whoever they wanted. Eventually, they were both diagnosed with the same STD.